When Ava received the news, she wasn't surprised. The old mansion on Crestwood Lane had finally been declared abandoned. Her Aunt Lillian, the last of the Sutherland line, had vanished a year ago, leaving only unanswered questions and an eerie emptiness in her wake. With no other family to claim it, the sprawling estate was hers, though she had no intention of keeping it. She planned a quick inspection and a faster sale until she arrived. The mansion loomed over her, dark and unwelcoming, its Victorian spires sharp against the cloudy sky. She felt a strange pull, like invisible threads guiding her inside. She ignored the unease bubbling in her stomach and stepped through the front door, greeted by the faint smell of mildew, as if the house itself were rotting from within. That first night, Ava heard a low rustling, almost like whispers. The house, with its thick velvet curtains and dust-laden chandeliers, seemed to breathe around her, sighing in the darkness. She wandered through the rooms, the feeling of being watched never leaving her, though she was alone. It was near midnight when she stumbled upon a faded photograph on a dusty mantel. It showed her Aunt Lillian, a young girl, with several strangers who looked equally unsettled, each bearing a haunted expression. Behind them, shadows seemed to cling, darker than the evening sky, like strange silhouettes hiding in the background. As Ava turned away from the photo, she noticed something strange, a flicker of light from under a closed door at the end of the hallway. She hadn't turned on any lights. Heart pounding, she approached and slowly opened the door, revealing a study lit by an oil lamp that looked recently used. But no one was there. She searched the room, finding journals and letters, all written in her aunt's distinct handwriting. They were full of frenzied ramblings, descriptions of figures who haunted her at night, their hollow eyes watching her every move. One entry read, "They come from the walls. They wait in the dark, craving company. They whisper, calling me into the shadows." Ava shivered, feeling a creeping chill as she realized her aunt had descended into madness, or maybe something else had driven her there. Ava decided to stay another night, compelled by a mix of dread and curiosity. That night, the whispers grew louder, filling the air like a chant. She barely slept, every creak and groan of the house amplifying her anxiety. The next morning, she found strange symbols etched into the walls of one of the guest rooms, symbols that looked like ancient runes or warnings. It dawned on her that she had never truly known her aunt. Lillian had always been odd, reclusive, and fearful. But Ava never imagined her life had been haunted. In the following days, Ava began to feel her own mind fray. Shadows seemed to dart around corners, always vanishing just as she turned. She could swear she heard footsteps pacing down the hall at night, doors creaking open on their own, the faint sound of someone breathing close to her. Yet no one was there. And the whispers grew clearer, calling her name, begging her to listen, to remember. One evening, she stumbled upon a small, locked room she had somehow missed before. The key she found on the fireplace mantel fit the lock perfectly, and she entered a space that was no ordinary room. Dark crimson wallpaper peeled from the walls, and an overwhelming sense of sorrow filled the air. In the middle of the room sat a single wooden chair, and in front of it, a large mirror covered with a black cloth. As she approached the mirror, the whispers intensified, urging her to lift the cloth. She felt her hands tremble as she pulled it away. Her own reflection stared back, but the room behind her was different. It was alive with the shadows of people she didn't recognize, their faces twisted in expressions of fear and despair. One figure stood out, a young woman who looked hauntingly familiar, her eyes hollow and her mouth open in a silent scream. It was her aunt, or something that looked like her, trapped in the mirror, as if frozen in that moment forever. Ava recoiled, her heart racing. But as she tried to leave the room, she found the door locked. Panicked, she pounded on it, but it wouldn't budge. Her reflection in the mirror moved independently, staring at her with a knowing, wicked smile. The shadows behind her moved closer, encircling her, whispering her name. She finally broke free, fleeing the room, but something in the house had changed. Shadows now clung to her own reflection, and the whispers were no longer confined to the night. They were with her always, following her, filling her mind, clouding her thoughts. As the days passed, she began to lose time, hours slipping away like grains of sand, leaving her disoriented and exhausted. It was as though the house was absorbing her, draining her, claiming her spirit just as it had claimed her aunt's. Desperate for escape, Ava packed her things, determined to leave Crestwood Lane and never look back. But as she reached the front door, she found it wouldn't open, no matter how hard she pulled. The windows wouldn't break, and the house seemed to be laughing at her, mocking her attempts to leave. That night, the mirror from the locked room appeared in her bedroom, leaning against the wall, and in it, she saw herself trapped, her own reflection twisted in agony, pleading to be let out. The whispers grew until they were a cacophony, voices of others who had come before her, all trapped within the walls, their souls bound to the house, desperate for company. She screamed, begged for release, but there was no one left to hear her. She was alone yet, surrounded by those who had come before, forgotten shadows caught in the endless night. Weeks later, when the real estate agent arrived to check on the property, the house seemed as silent and empty as ever. Only one new photo appeared on the mantel, a picture of Ava, staring wide-eyed and frightened, the same shadows lurking behind her